right? Now, today we're going to learn on some more key concepts and some terminologies about a business process, all right? So we did go through the key concepts, and this is how your business process actually works. You have a series of steps in a particular order, and each step defines a particular action. It can be initiation type, action step, it could be an approval type, or others. Based on the condition logics, we looked into the who, what, and when of the, or basically reading the business process, what each of the different elements or the components of a business process are, right? So today we're gonna continue to go more deeper into what, like the business process steps, notifications, allowed actions, payroll, what those are. But before that, let's go on some theory. Okay, let's get on some more concepts before we get there. We did copy a business process. We have not done any much editing yet, but that would be in the upcoming sessions. All right, Workday business process terminology. An event is a transaction that occurs within the application. Like example, hire, terminate, create position. These all are events, and these events are nothing but different business processes. A different business process is the definition of the workflow that is to be conducted, the order of that workflow, who does it, and what steps they are to do relative to an event. To understand this, you just have to think it in the most simplistic way. If I have to do a particular step, let's say if you have to make coffee, right? You start by boiling the water, adding coffee, adding sugar. If you need milk, add milk. All right, and then pour that coffee. That is how you make a coffee. I think that's the simplest way. So what is the order of that workflow? It's not like you can just put coffee powder or coffee beans in your mug and then add water to it, right? You cannot heat up raw coffee first. Obviously with a machine you can, but not if you're using the traditional way of making coffee, right? So there has to be a series of order that follows, and who does it? Like in this case, your stove, your oven, or wherever you're cooking, your frying pan is also an actor, including you. You initiated the process by adding water into the cup. Now the next step is for the stove or the burning or for the gas to do the heating, right? So everything comes with an actor who needs to take an action, and that actor is nothing but the security group. And what type of action, that is also defined at the level of business process. A task is an activity, a to-do, an action, or an approval that the user needs to complete because it is a step in a business process. Now, this task can be an independent sub-process as well. In other words, it can be a sub-process for your parent process. Like in case of onboarding, we have edit personal information, edit emergency contact, edit government IDs. All these are independent business process as well, but they are being collectively used in your onboarding parent process. But onboarding is not a parent process. It's just for the reference that when you're adding or using sub processes in a bigger process, the bigger process automatically becomes your parent process. Okay, but you need to understand that the security of your child process or your sub processes remains at the sub process level. They do not inherit the security from the parent process. We'll definitely look into that once we go on the complete hands-on mode for this. Business process steps, they can be sequential or parallel. And these are like, there are different types of steps that they have been listed out here. So let's go over them one by one. Action steps. It allows either the assignee to update, enrich the transaction, or trigger a sub process. And in simple words, it's an action. you are taking an action. Either you are submitting the information, either you are approving. It's an action, right? The next is approval. Allows the assignee to view information but not change it. That's the difference between an action step and an approval step. Right? In an action step, when you get once you get that step in your inbox, you open it up. You will be allowed to edit the steps and then submit. Even if you have to edit or you don't want to edit, but you will have the edit access. But in case of an approval step, you only have the view only information for that particular inbox item that you receive. And the only actions you can take is either submit it, deny it, or send it back for revision, or send it back to more approvers. You cannot edit it yourself. A good example is, let's say at the time of initiating or creating a new job requisition, all right, if a manager, or let's say if a recruiter initiates creating a job requisition, and as part of the process, it should go to a manager for a review, or basically an approval. I won't say review, let me correct that and start from the top. The business case that we are understanding here to understand the difference between action and approval is, a recruiter initiates a job requisition process. The next step, in the first use case, the next step goes to the manager for approval. Now, manager can review the information, and if there are any modifications that are needed, which the manager seems fit that this should be changed, he can either send it back, or the only option is he would send it back to the recruiter, or deny that process. That this is incorrect, please start a new one with the right information, or send it back for revision. Right? In the second use case, the same recruiter initiates the process, but in this case, the next step goes to someone in the HR team to review that requisition. Now, in that case, they will have more access than the manager. Because in case of a review versus an approval, review allows you to also edit the information. So that's a difference between an action step and an approval step. Though both of them are a type action, in a sense, a manager is also taking an action. But an actual action step allows you to also edit the information. Right? Approval chain, approval that travels up the organization hierarchy until a defined stopping point. Usually used in cases where you have some compensation, like a bonus of $5,000 or more, like a certain threshold amount that after which you need certain level of approvals. So in that case, you can have an approval chain set up. That this would go to your manager, your manager's managers, your manager's manager's manager. You can set up until what level, or until what level of hierarchy you want to go up. The next is consolidated approval. It combines multiple sub-process approval into a single step. A little out of date, or I'll say not much used, not many good use cases as well, but it can be used if you want to. If in a process you are using a lot of sub-processes, you can club the approvals into a single step. The caveat here is that all those steps should go to the same security group, which is rarely the case. That's why these are not used very often. Right? The next is batch, integration, report, or service. These are again different types of business process steps, and each of them are used for a different purpose. Like if I start from the right, service steps. These are types like create Workday account, reset Workday account, etc., etc., or automated leave balance payout. If an employee is terminated, the system automatically put their leave balance to zero, and whatever that leave balance is, that information is sent to payroll to be paid out if it's need to be paid out. Right? So these are certain service steps. Again, these are Workday delivered. You cannot create your own service steps. So you can add those. Usually in the hire process, you will see those. Like for a new hire, you need to create a Workday account. So this service will create a Workday account for themselves. The next one is report. You can actually run a report through a business process. For example, a good use case is a time of process. In time of process, maybe at some of the last steps, you can have a step type as report, and you can have the receiver or the group, someone as a time off partner or an absence partner, and you can call out that report, and the output of that report will be sent, or the report will be sent to that absence partner for any information they need to check. You can also call an integration through a business process step, as long as you have the integration properly set up and linked to the business process. Next is a batch. Batch is basically used, again, very rare use cases in HCM side, more used on the financial side. But in HCM side, it's like once you finish a hire process, the last step, a batch process is triggered, which understands the hire process is complete and initiates the onboarding itself. So that's an automatic process. So batch is like you finish one batch and you initiate the next set of steps in that particular batch. This might not be the best example that I'm giving because I don't have much visibility into the batch processes, more used on the financial side, but I'll look into the community if I can find something and share with you. Okay. Then comes the routing restrictions. Now these routing restrictions, again, something like consolidated approvals are not much used because there are other ways we can handle things in a better manner, right? Though it says that it prevent duplicate approval for initiator, prior approvers, and even subject. What that means is, so for example, the job using that same example of job requisition, recruiter initiates it, goes to a manager for an approval step. Now let's say the third step is for a recruiter to review after a manager has approved, right? So a recruiter has initiated the process and the manager has approved it. The third step is again going back to recruiter for a review. What's the point of that? Because a recruiter is the initiator. So what we do is we put a routing restrictions that if initiator is a prior approver or a prior group that has already been used, then skip the step. So what will happen is the third step would be skipped and it will move to the next step. Or I would say the third step will not be triggered. It will be evaluated, but it will not be triggered or executed. But we can do that by condition logics as well, which is a better way. We just put a if condition on the step that if initiator is a prior approver or if initiator is the approver, then skip the step. So that is how we go about it. To do in checklists. If you want a series of tasks to be done in one step, you can create a checklist. But again, these are limited by what steps you can add as a checklist. You cannot add checklist of items which you think you can. It's Workday delivered. You can create your own checklist and add those steps in the checklist, but you cannot create the steps that you want in your checklist. Those are Workday delivered. You just have to pick them and use it. And then there's something called as to do. So let's just go through the 3 bullet points that we have. Tasks that are performed outside or inside of Workday. To do is a manual task that can be assigned to a role. Checklist is a collection of to-dos. So both of them goes hands in hand. A to-do step is basically just an information step, right? So for example, as part of onboarding, you are new hire into the organization and you have to add in your other IDs. You have already added your government IDs like SSN, your PAN number, or based on what location you are in. But the next step is to add more IDs like driving license, passports, any visas, etc., etc. So you can do that. There's a to-do step for that. That to-do steps tells you that please enter your other IDs. So just an information, and there's no step in the Workday that you have to do in there. It's just telling you that this is something that you have to do. You either do it within the Workday or outside the Workday. right? So these are to-dos, and a collection of these to-dos makes a checklist. Like update your preferred name or add in additional names if any. Some people have more different names and based on different IDs that they have. So that can be covered as to-dos. Right? So not every business process has it. Mostly employee specific business process like onboarding, you'll find some of them. Notifications, you can send to the participant specified in the business process definition. They can be triggered on completion or entry. These notifications have a separate tab. These are not business process steps. Not sure why they're added here, but these are a very good way of sending out notifications to the respective members of a security group. So for example, talking about the same use case that we are working with, the recruiter initiates a job requisition. The next step, it goes to manager for approval. Now, a manager is not every day logging into the Workday system and looking in their inbox that what is the task that they have to do. Though that's the aim, like they log into the Workday like they log into every other tool that they use. But what we do is we set up a notification on step B, or the second step, that as soon as this step is initiated, an email notification should be sent out to the manager. Now, everyone looks at email every day, right? So now the manager will know that there's something in their inbox. And based on how we set up the notification, we can also add in a URL link in that email notification that just by clicking there, they will automatically be directed to their Workday account and to the action step that they have to take. So that way nobody misses anything and the time is also spent wisely. In another scenario where you can set up notification, but that would be alert. So let's not go there. In another scenario where you want the payroll team to be notified that there is a termination, that an involuntary termination. So you can set up the notification that as soon as the step is triggered, a notification should be sent onto the payroll team, updating them with all the information that this employee has been terminated for so and so reason. Please process their final payroll accounts, etc., etc. So notifications has a wider use case and they are used everywhere from every business process. And these are set up at process level, right? Don't confuse them with alerts. There's something called as alerts as well. Those are different. We'll talk about them maybe at the end of the course, right? The next is conditional steps. This is not a specific type of step, but what they mean by what the slide is trying to tell us is you can have conditions in your business process like we looked at yesterday. Excuse me. So the entry conditions, now please make a note of this. There are two types of conditions: entry conditions and validation conditions. We'll discuss about entry conditions today and validation conditions in maybe an upcoming session. So these entry conditions are nothing but it decides whether this step will be executed or not based on that condition. If you have multiple conditions in one step, then they all work in an and logic, not or, and logic. That means if you have three conditions, let's say the conditions are employees from US, employee is full-time, employee is, you already gave the logic for full-time. Let's say employees on commission. Okay, so all these three conditions need to be true. Then only that step will be executed. If one of the condition is false, the Workday will move on to the next step. So these entry conditions are condition logics built for that specific business process, which can also be used in other processes as well. That's not a problem. Workday does not restrict you from doing that. But remember that if you have multiple conditions in one step, they all work in an AND logic.
Rohan, yesterday we created multiple conditions. So in there, it means that all the conditions have to be met for the particular step to occur, right?
Yesterday, we did not create any condition. We just created a rule-based business process. You remember we created that
Yes, rule-based business process, right?
So that
So
was
how does it?
that's different.
Mm-hmm.
That is what defines or differentiates that business process from all the other business process.
Okay.
These conditions are actually the conditions used within the business process at the step level.
Okay.
So if I show you in the tenant, you see these conditions. These are what I'm talking about. These are your entry conditions.
Okay, I get it.
If you have a multiple of them in one step, then all of them have to be true.
Okay, it will be there in one step. Okay, fine.
Yes.
But it is written if on the top. So what is that?
If this is
Condition.
column which, like, if this is true, then if it's blank, then there's no condition. This will execute anyway.
But you said that the AND logic is going to occur in the entry condition. So you mean to say that if B, C, and E is true, then the condition is replied.
Let me help you with that.
Rohan, here not only and but true or false condition will also take a part, right?
These work as true, like what do you mean by true or false?
So while maintaining a step condition, I'm talking about if a certain thing is true, only then it'll take ahead. So we can add work tags there and another conditions to validate it thoroughly well to process the business process.
Yes. So in this case, what I did is, so this condition already existed here. This is Workday delivered, because if you use this step, you automatically get this condition. Now, what I did is I added another condition. This is a custom condition created by any consultant, right? Now, that and logic concept that I was saying, that for this step B to be triggered or to be executed, both of these condition has to be true. That employee with the primary job, employee should be either from US or Canada and should be from executive management group. Then only this action will be triggered. Let's say if the employee is from US and Canada and not in an executive group, it will move to step C and then evaluate this condition. So it's not the AND condition of all the logics. I'm saying the AND condition on each and every step. That is what I meant.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now let me just go ahead and remove it, because if someone is practicing, I don't want to disturb their setup. Now, if you see something, there's something called as entry condition here. Okay, remember that this is called as an entry condition. Now, if I try to do the same thing at step A, okay. Oh, I'm not getting that option. Oh, onboarding is not a good example for this. Let me go with hire. I'll pick any hire process for now. is it taking so much time? Okay, now if I try to, okay, now I'm at step A. All right. Now, if I try to do the same thing, maintain step conditions, you would see a difference. It says validation condition, not entry condition. Now, let me explain you the difference between validation, and for that, I'll have to duplicate the tab. Okay. So let me just open any other step other than step A. Now, if you see something here, we are at any other step other than step A, which says maintain step conditions, entry conditions. Then this step defines everything. If you read here, it says entry conditions. If all conditions are true, the step will be entered, which we just discussed. If there are multiple conditions here, all of them have to be true, then only the step will be entered, means it will be executed. If you read the description of validation conditions, it says, if all conditions are false, the step will exit and process will continue. Now, what it means by that is, let me go back on this tab. Now, again, this is the same thing. If all conditions are false, the step will exit and process will continue. All right, so let me put this. Let's pick up this one. Worker has employee contract. Now, this condition is saying that the worker is a contractor, assuming that this is that condition. All right, I'm going to mark it as critical. Click OK. Now, the difference between an entry condition is validation condition is in the backend, these are conditions, right? They work on if else logic. But here, the difference is in their working. One works only if all of them are true, then the step is triggered. The other one, if it's false, then only the process will continue. And that is why they are only added, or I would say that is why they are primarily added at the initiation step. Once this saves, I don't know why is it taking too much time. Oh, come on. Something not processing correctly. It's taking too much time. Okay. Do we have it here? No, did not get saved. For some reason that did not get saved. What I was trying to do is add a condition here. So let's try that again. Or maybe I'll just explain the difference. Right. So in this case, step D will only be executed if this condition is true. Now, if I pick up this condition and put it at the initiation, first of all, we cannot have entry condition at initiation because the process has to initiate. But we can have restricted conditions, and those are your validation conditions, right? If, let's say, I use the same condition as a validation condition at the initiation step, in the meantime, let me just try to add that while I talk about it. It's just not saved. All right, so that comes somewhere here as a validation condition, which we are not able to see right now. But validation condition works the opposite way, right? For the process to execute, we add validations condition at the initiation step to make sure that we are not running this step, or we are not processing the step for any employee or any worker which should not be using this process. So in this case, we added a condition called as worker has employee contract, which means that worker is still on contract. So we don't want to use this hire process for them. So what we do is we enter that as a validation condition. Now the system will evaluate that, and if it's false, right? If it comes out to be false, that the employee does not have an employee contract, that is what it means by that description, that if it is false, the step will exit and the process will continue. That means if the employee does not have a contract, it will exit the initiation step and move on to step B, which means your validation condition has to be false for the process to continue. Now, if you have an employer who actually has a contract, right? In that case, Workday will throw an error and say that this is, or whatever that error message could be, but that error would be describing that this is not the business process that will be executed for this employee. And that would be handled at the level of your validation condition. So if all conditions are false, the step will exit and the process will continue. So to avoid anyone running a process which they should not be, or they are not eligible for, that is where we use validation conditions. Another example of validation condition is in time of business case, right? For some locations, you only allow like a day, like a whole number to be used as a day off, right? You cannot have like a 3-hour day off or a 4 hours off in a day. You cannot have that. Let's say if that is one of the restrictions. So what you do is you enter that restriction at the initiation step on a time of business process, that if the number of hours is equal to 4, right? If you put that condition, now what will happen is if anyone puts the value as 4 hours, which is like half a day, then they are not allowed to apply for that time off. Like the process will not continue because your validation condition is true, but your validation condition has to be false. So let's say if they enter any other value than 4, like a day or maybe anything more than 4, then only it will allow you to go with that. So the concept of validation conditions is different from entry conditions just in the working, that one has to be true and the other has to be false. A very common interview question is, do we add validation conditions only on the initiation step? The answer is no. You can add it on any other step as well, but not to a step where you already have a entry condition. I cannot have a validation condition added where I have an entry condition. Even if you add it, you will get errors. Right? So not very commonly used validation conditions, but you should know if you are working with business processes. Because once you join an organization, you will find business processes with validation conditions, and you should know what those are. Okay, right now it's saved. Let's see, where is it added now? You see, it's added here, worker has employee contract. So any employee with a contract will not be eligible for this process. Right? And if you see, it does not come in the if section. It has a separate section of its own, which is for your validation. Okay. Getting back on track with our slides. Configure business process steps, create a business process notification, which will be part of our hands-on. We just talked about this. Specify conditions on a step with business process. Entry conditions and exit conditions. These exit conditions are nothing but your validation conditions. Right? Multiple conditions within a single rule using and or logic. Compare to numbers, dates. So all of these, like I've been saying in previous sessions as well, that the logic works the same way about how these conditions are evaluated. It's just the different areas where you're using it. Now, some of the common business process rules, or I'll say conditions, can be based on a management level or a job profile, something similar to what compensation had, but a few other can be used, like above 2,000 for an expense report. If someone is asking for, if someone has posted an expense of more than $2,000, it might need multiple approvals. Right? So some other cases here. Then test business process configuration. We'll do that, and we'll view the business process diagram as well. Oh, we are at the quiz. Okay. So that was all for today, primarily on a theory level.